Good morning, everyone. I'll wait a couple of seconds to let the Zoom room populate, and then we'll get started. All right. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Committee of the Revision of the Penal Code, which is now in session. I am Mike Romano, Committee Chair. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We'll begin with a roll call in alphabetical order. Assembly Member Bryan, not here. Judge Espinoza.
I'm here.
Mary Kennedy.
Here.
Professor Ochin.
Here.
Professor Rummel.
Here.
Senator Wiener.
Present.
Thank you. Today's agenda. We're going to move in three parts. First, we're going to discuss the draft of our annual report and recommendations for 2025. We're going to have public comment on that report and recommendation, and then we'll vote. We have to have public comment before we vote. Then we'll have brief discussion about topics for studying next year, administrative and legislative and data updates, and then we'll conclude the final public comment. So we'll be doing that twice this morning. As we begin, as always, reminders about Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. First, please note that members of the public can be watched or participate this meeting on the first floor conference room at 925 L Street in Sacramento. Thank you once again to Megan for being present. Thank you, Assembly Member Bryan, currently present. Second is a reminder to committee members, the law requires that members of the committee be, quote, visibly appear on camera, unquote, during the meetings unless there are technical difficulties or screen is being shared. If you have such technical difficulties, please let us know and we'll handle it from there. All right. Senator Wiener, if you can join us, that'd be great, but understood if it's an issue on your end. Let's now turn to the most important.
I will shortly.
Great. Let's turn to the most important business of the day, discussing the draft of our 2025 annual report, which was prepared by staff. First off, I want to say that this is our 6th annual report, and I have to commend our staff who wrote this report, conducted all the background research, and recruited the expert witnesses who appeared before the committee this year. We had over 24 witnesses that appeared before us, and really none of it would be possible without you guys. Thank you, Tom, Rick, and Joy. You guys are the best in the business. I also want to thank the California Policy Lab, who we work in close collaboration with and who wrangled most of the data for our report. As you know, the legislature has adopted over 24 of our past recommendations, which have helped contribute to a significant reduction in California's prison population while maintaining or improving overall statewide crime rates. And I'm very proud of those results. I want to remind everyone that this report remains in draft form. We will discuss and vote on the recommendations in a moment, and the report itself will be published and submitted to the governor and legislature in mid-December. But before we have a more general discussion of the report, as noted at the top of the report in the staff memo, we have two preliminary decisions to make. And those decisions are A, about the scope of the 170.6 blanket disqualification recommendation, and B, the inclusion of a recommendation on soft interview rooms. So let's do the 1170.6 one first. The issue is whether this recommendation, which limits but does not eliminate blanket challenges, should apply only to prosecutors. This is how the draft was written. As I recall our conversation, this was kind of the momentum of the committee. We discussed this a few times, but we have not come to a final decision. My vote is that we keep the draft as is and the recommendation only apply to prosecutors. I was wondering if anybody has any comments or disagreements. Judge Espinoza.
Yeah, I don't want to be the fly in the ointment, but having supervised the criminal courts for 4 years in Los Angeles County, I will say, while it is more common that prosecutors would exercise a blanket affidavit, it's not unheard of for the defense to be unhappy with the judge's ruling and start refusing to go to the courtroom. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think we talked about this. We recognized it. It would seem to be very county to county. That was one of the things that was a little bit eye-opening to us, if I remember it correctly. The different counties had different preponderances. But as I recall, the conversation settling, and again, we didn't completely come to a decision, is that because public defenders represent individuals, and it's hard to make decisions for future clients that you don't even know yet, that would make sense to apply this to prosecutors only, recognizing also the political reality that likely the legislature would want to include both. But we think this is the better policy, so that was, or I do at least. So that's the way that I came.
Yeah, I will say I think personally it should apply to both, and I think there's no way this would move in the legislature without applying to both. And so to me, it makes sense to recommend both, but I may be in the minority on that.
The other people want to say anything?
I agree with you, Mike. I think we should adopt it as is. And I think there's a fundamental difference between a prosecutor's office who's representing the state of California and a public defender's office who are representing individuals and have an ethical obligation as an attorney to make individual recommendations to their client and then allow it to be the client's choice whether or not to paper someone. And I worry that if we put restrictions on them, we begin to infringe on their clients' rights and it becomes problematic and possibly unconstitutional. So I agree with and I know we've had a lot of back and forth on this, and I've stated my opinion several times, but I think that is the fundamental reason that we need to make a distinction between a prosecutor's office and a public defender's office. It's not really a question of unfairness, it's a question of individual clients' rights and ethical obligations of the attorneys representing them.
Yeah, and I practiced for a long time in civil court, not in criminal, so stipulated. I personally think 170.6 is terrible globally, and I know a lot of my former compatriots in the legal profession would be mad at me for saying that. I think it's a very problematic provision. I don't believe 170.6 is grounded in the Constitution. It's statutory. We could eliminate it entirely. And in San Francisco, we see both of our offices using it. I don't want to say liberally, but on a not infrequent basis, sometimes entirely driving a judge out of criminal court entirely. And so that's sort of my perspective. Appreciate it.
So I agree with the recommendation for the reasons stated. I am aware that the committee will often try to balance our substantive policy recommendations against the realities of policymaking and politics in Sacramento. But I do believe that we should give the legislature our best recommendations based on our awareness of policy, law, trends, practice, ethics, and I think that this recommendation does that. So I support it as written.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. I share Professor Ochen's sentiment that we should recommend what we think is best with the full knowledge that, as Senator Wiener was saying, if anyone to take it up, is quite likely, if not near certainty, that it would apply to both. And just to remember, to refresh everybody's memory, this does not prohibit blanket challenges. It only, if a blanket challenge is made, then the judge who is challenged can bring that issue to a judge of a different county. And I believe this is how it's done in Oregon. And the challenger would then have to come forward with a reasonable explanation about why the blanket challenge should remain. So it's not a true blanket. Does anybody else has anything to say? All right. Well, we won't vote on this particular recommendation quite yet. We're going to have to by the end of this conversation this morning. And we're also going to have to make a decision if we want unanimity on all of our issues, or if we're willing to have dissent. And
I'm not gonna vote against it. I just wanted to express my perspective.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
All right.
Same.
All right, great. That's helpful, Judge. The next issue is to whether to include the recommendation around soft interview rooms. This was discussed at our meeting in October, but we did not formally discussed making a recommendation, and it wasn't in our original staff memo. The staff has drafted a recommendation that appears in the draft report that urges greater use of these soft interview rooms. These are rooms that are not the interrogation rooms that are used by police, but they are rooms to be more appropriate and comfortable for victims and families. And my vote is that we adopt a recommendation to
Mike is frozen for me, and judging from everyone else's expressions for others as well. Let me I'll give him a call.
I'm trying to solve it. Can you carry on without me? I'll be right there.
Mike, we can actually hear you now.
Yeah, it looks like he's coming back in bits and pieces. But I think Mike's was just explaining what a soft interview room was, which is basically a room that is, you know, a little more attuned to people expressing traumatic events when talking to cops and other people like that. And I think the thing that was most striking from the testimony we heard about is that they're pretty cheap to put together. They're a few $1,000, which is not nothing, but in the, you know, grand scheme of things, seems well worth the cost. Mike, I think you're back with us.
I am. Thank you, Tom. I don't know. Did anybody have any questions or concerns about the soft interview room recommendation?
So the recommendation is to recommend that everybody adopt it and establish a fund. Is that what it is? Because I just want to make sure there's so many people that already have it. I want, again, going through the legislature, you don't want to have this retroactive state mandate for all these counties that have already done it. So it's all kind of in the recommended, and we'll help you.
That's the idea. We want to encourage more of these. We don't want to regulate them. We don't want to create funded mandates or issues like that. It's just something that we thought that was relatively simple. I mean, seems like a straightforward thing to do to help people, and particularly crime victims. And so it's something that we thought we could recommend without having a full panel discussion about it. All right. Unless anybody has any other questions or concerns, I'm going to move on. As I said, we're going to first discuss the report, each recommendation. Tom is going to show a slide with the recommendations. Then we'll hear public comment, as we must before voting, and then we'll address any concerns that came up during public comment. Please note that we are still finalizing the data, and this draft and report will also be put into a final form by a graphic designer. Our goal today is to see if there are any changes that the committee has to make, with the understanding that I will have final discretion over copy editing, adding citations, updating data, and other non-substantive changes. Okay, Tom has a slide pulled up. I hope everybody can see it. Rather than read through each one of these recommendations, which were discussed at each one of our committee meetings and in staff memos and in the draft report, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions or concerns about any of them. You can start wherever you would like. We do not need to go from the top. On my reduced screen, it's hard for me to see if anyone has any hands raised, so please jump in if anybody has any questions or concerns or thoughts.
I don't see any hands, Mike.
Okay. Going once? Going twice? All right, great. With that said, does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns about anything else in the draft report? Thank you. All right, we'll move to public comment. This is a moment of our time where we look to our viewers and listeners for public comment on our 2025 annual report. We'll have a second round of comments shortly after for other matters. If there's anyone there in person, please line up where indicated to get in line to comment online, please select the raise hand function on Zoom. If you're calling in, please hit *9. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that if you make a public comment, your name and/or phone number may be displayed as part of the recording. If you'd like to comment, please do that now. And we'll take a few minutes to see how many people have to comment. And then based on that, I will decide how long each person has. As a reminder, we'll be voting on the committee report after hearing public comment. So we haven't voted yet. We'll have to have public comment first, and then we'll vote. Okay,
I've
Tom,
seen
can you?
no hands have gone up, so
All right. All right. Moving along. All right, without any hands gone up, I'm not going to rehash each of the 10 recommendations at this time, but instead ask if there are any additions or modifications the committee members will have to make. I just asked you guys that, so I don't think that there will. We haven't had any public comment. All right, so finally, can I have a motion and a second to adopt the draft report subject to our discussion earlier,
So
including the
moved.
prerogative that I have as chair to make non-substantive changes, approve design, and execute its publication? I'm sorry, did somebody,
Yeah, moved.
thank you.
Second.
Great, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Excellent. Report is adopted unanimously. Thank you all. This is a year of another incredible amount of work. As I said at the top, Tom, Rick, and Joy, we really couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much. And it's a really, really incredible document. And once it's finally done with all of the charts and graphs, I will say that not only have over 24 of the recommendations become law, but many courts, including the California Supreme Court, cite our reports regularly. I really think that they're having the kind of influence that we hoped when we started this committee. And as I said, it really wouldn't be possible without obviously the members, but in particular staff and our friends at CPL. So thanks to everybody.
And our
right.
chair, Mike, you do a phenomenal job, and you've led us all year as you have for several years. So thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you. It is genuinely a pleasure working with everybody, and I really appreciate how we've come together as a group to do this virtually and substantively. And anyway, it's a great part of what I do. So thank you. Okay. With the annual report finalized, we want to have a brief discussion from Tom about proposed areas of study and research for next year. Tom, take it away.
all right. So as ever, these are ideas that we propose to study. The agenda can change. We can add things to it as things come up and as members think of things that might be of interest. So as always, this is sort of a living document, but this is a sense of what we think it sort of makes sense to look at next year. And we'll talk a little bit about meeting scheduling and some changes we're thinking about that as well. But first, the first topic is diversion, probation, and record relief. So, California has done a lot of activity around these areas in the last few years, and we think it makes sense to sort of look at it and see how these systems work together, especially record relief, which, we've got really expansive laws, and we have some research from the California Policy Lab. We can sort of see how that has been working out or what we anticipate working and sort of how all these systems work together. And a growing body of research about the effectiveness from a public safety point of view of increasing diversion and things like that. The second is taking another dive into bail and pretrial detention, which it's been, I think, 3 years since we last did that. Not much has changed, which is a little dispiriting. But I think there are some areas where the committee can revisit recommendations we made previously that still make a lot of sense, and I think figure out some new ones as well. And of course, I think one thing we'll focus on here too is what Los Angeles County has done with their what they call PARP, their pretrial release program for nonviolent, non-serious felonies. The third one is looking at the quality of statewide criminal justice data, and this is mostly the crime data that's reported, and if there's any improvements or adjustments that can be made there, as well as final dispositions in court. There's something that the nickname for it is the dispo gap, where it's been the reality for decades that a lot of final convictions are missing from the information the Department of Justice collects, and that obviously has a lot of consequences. The fourth is looking back at sentencing enhancements and other things around sentence length, like aggravating factors that I think we've talked about a lot, but haven't addressed head on, like the nickel prior to great bodily injury enhancement, and taking a look and seeing if these things need to be updated or adjusted, because a lot of these, are decades old at this point. And the fifth topic is sort of looking at CDCR programs, particularly around reentry, elderly parole, and on some related things like this. I think this will sort of be what we do later in the year, so we have a lot of time to develop this. I know a lot of you all have a particularly special interest in this topic, so we can sort of, hash that out as we get closer. That's what we propose for doing for next year. Any questions or thoughts sort of on the substantive topics before I turn to just some procedural thoughts? Great.
Well, let me just emphasize really quick a couple of things. First of all, I'm very discouraged about the way that the state has implemented the Humphrey bail decision, and it's sad that almost nothing has changed outside of LA, as far as I can tell, or it hasn't changed nearly enough. It doesn't seem like people are complying with the law, and I'm not sure how we can help, but that's something that I want to weigh in on. And then second is that as always, these are not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. As people come to you and say, hey, what about this? Please bring them to Tom and staff, and, we can move things around or, shoehorn different issues in. Obviously, the earlier you get to Tom and staff in the beginning of the year, the more likely it'll be able to fit in. All right. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, great. All right. Scheduling wise, I think we're going to have the same number of meetings we've had the last few years, which is basically 5 meetings. I always give us the wiggle room to say less than usual, but we always end up having this about 5 meetings. So it's 4 meetings with topics, and then this final sort of wrap up meeting, voting on the annual report, and then figuring out next year's work. One thing that Rick, Joy, Mike, and I have talked about is if there are ways to have our meetings be a little more efficient, to cover the same amount of material, but perhaps have the meetings be shorter. And I think we're going to experiment a little bit and try to have less panelists come in and perhaps have more information filtered through staff, because we do a lot of, we talk to dozens of people for every meeting. So we are, I think, able to give a lot of that information perhaps in a more efficient way. So that's a thought for how we'll sort of try to make things more efficient and use everyone's time a little bit better. And, feedback on how that works, we'd love to hear it, but that's sort of an initial thought. Professor Roach, I don't know if you had it looks like you have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering that some time ago, when I first joined the committee, we had talked about having an in-person committee hearing at a custodial facility, like a prison. And I just am wondering where that is on our agenda, if that's still being debated, because I strongly recommend that we do so. I think it's really important that we hear from incarcerated people about how they experience the penal code and the issues that concern them, in addition to talking about our regular agenda items. So I just want to, I guess, float that and put that on the table for discussion.
Thank you for re-raising that. I had actually forgotten about that, but I think I agree it's a good idea. Judge?
Yeah, I was just going to say, early on in the ODR experience in LA, we conducted a town hall inside the LA County Jail with both male and female detainees, and it was incredibly helpful to hear what their experiences were and how we can improve their situations. I recognize that Professor Ocean is talking about state prison, but I still think it would be a helpful exercise to go to one of the state prison facilities and engage with inmates.
Yeah, I mean, and our jurisdiction is not limited to prisons too. It could be jails. There are going to be obviously logistical details to iron out and Open Meeting Act requirements, but I think that's something at least we should explore, Tom. And given that it's, this the right time of year to think about, maybe we can get our act together by, 6 months or so from now to actually pull this off. I don't want to put any extra pressure on you guys because I know how hard you work, but I would like to see if we can at least try to pull it off.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm so glad this has come up. I do, on my extremely long to-do list. It has been on there for years, so I think the 2026 will be the year to do it. And I think CDCR will be very eager to work with us and make it happen. So yeah,
Gonna help out with that, Tom, help facilitate at one of the prisons and find a group of people who would be diverse enough to speak on all the topics that we attempt to cover in our committee.
Great. All right.
In the spirit of bipartisanship too, or multi-partisanship or whatever, I think I want to make sure that we try to connect, and as we always do, with folks in law enforcement and their various committees. And whether or not, I'm not saying that we have our whole committee meeting, at the Sheriff's Association, but at least reach out to them and say that we're equally welcome to share our ideas with them.
Great point.
Okay. Tom, I think you have some administrative data and bookkeeping.
Yes, this is the last thing on the process. We'll aim for our first meeting in February. It's just like it has been the last few years. We'll probably end up meeting in March. I think we'll do that diversion probation record relief topic first, and I'll reach out to everyone soon to get a meeting scheduled for the rest of the year. Yes, all right. And on the one other quick update before we get to the data front, just a quick legislative update. So there was, since a few days after we met in October, Governor Newsom signed a bill implementing one of the committee's recommendations around post-conviction discovery, AB 1036, from Assemblymember Schultz. So we can check that off the to-do list. And there's a few bills listing here that, became 2-year bills that are still in the mix. And hopefully we'll see some positive developments there as well in the new year. Okay, on the data front, so I just wanted to share a new data resource that we've created with the California Policy Lab using CDCR data. And this has to do with Prop 36, the voter initiative that was passed a year ago that created some new wobbler offenses, which would allow more people to be convicted of felonies for petty theft with prior convictions, as well as what's called the treatment mandated drug possession felony, where you have prior drug possession offenses. So, we, as I'm sure many of you have as well, get a lot of incoming inquiries about what's going on with Prop 36. And we decided to put together a resource that we're going to update monthly, showing people who are admitted to prison for these offenses, sentence length, and demographics, just some basic information that we want to update regularly. And you can access it at this URL here. It's just a Google Doc right now because we wanted to make it super easy to access, but it's as reliable as everything else. And I just wanted to share some of the data that's in there right now. So the first thing we have is monthly admissions for each of these offenses. The dark blue offense here, this is the drug possession offense, and the yellow-orange one is the petty theft with the prior offense. And so this is monthly admissions for each of these offenses, people going to prison for each one starting in January. And we just see, a steady trend upwards. But I think it's really important to put into context that this is still, around 3% of people admitted to CDCR every month. So we are seeing more people admitted. It's about, in October, it was about 4 people every day if you add the 2 offenses together. Compared to about 2,300 people who are admitted to CDCR every month. So it's still a very small percentage of overall CDCR admissions, but we are seeing it increase like this. And I do think for most of these people, these are folks who otherwise would not have had a felony conviction or not otherwise be going to prison. So they're sort of new to the prison system in a way.
Tom, real quick, how do we know that? How do we know that piece that they wouldn't have, that this isn't a plea down from a robbery or something like that?
Well, these are where it's the controlling offense. And I think, most of this conduct would have been a misdemeanor before. So the fact that you're convicted, it could be a plea down. So that's why, it's hard to say for sure, but.
Aren't they all pleas? Virtually?
Yeah, but I think you're probably, given that it's so low level in the first place, a lot of these are probably pleading to what the conduct was. But it's a good question. It's one of the things that we don't really have the data to examine. Though we're working on that right now.
It devils every friggin' conviction too. So I understand that that's not unique to this piece.
What we can say, yeah, Tom, you say that kind of nominally it's not a large percentage of intake, but if you're just doing a year or a month over month increase as a percentage, that would be a massive increase from the 5 in January to the 83 in October, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And of course, the law has only been in effect for less than a year. It's felony cases that tend to take longer, and especially we'll talk a little bit about the drug treatment thing in a second. So it kind of makes sense that we're seeing, things come
I mean,
online.
like
But
it'd be like 1,000% increase, right? From January. I mean, if if you were framing the data that way.
It should plateau out. And if it doesn't plateau out, then, we have something to, I think, be concerned about. But I think if it stays, around 100 to 200 people a month without and it plateaus out, then we'll have a good sense. But I agree with you, Assembly Member Ryan, the trend is not is not good at all. But because it's so new, I'm not convinced that this won't plateau out. We just have to keep our eye on it.
and that's one reason why we thought it was worth spending the resources to update this monthly, so we can sort of keep that close eye on it. Now, this is very similar. This is just the total population in prison each month for the offense. So we see there's about 400 people in right now for the theft offense and around 150 for the drug possession offense. And again, this is just if these offenses are the most serious offense. So there are other people in prison who also have conviction for these, but they're also convicted of something more serious. And then I wanted to show just a little bit of the demographic and sentencing information. So this is the median sentence length for the petty theft with the prior offense by race. And, we see higher sentences by around 8 months for American Indian and Alaskan Native and Black people compared to Hispanic and white people. Now, this is, putting second strikers and first people without second strikes together. But we'd go into a little bit more detail in the actual document, but I just wanted to show you all some of the highlights. Okay, now this is a chart. This is using data from the Judicial Council. So they're putting out reports. It was part of the budget this year that they have to put out reports around case filings and some things that happen in court with these cases. So this is cases that are filed for the drug possession felony. And it's the first 6 months of the law. And I excluded any county that didn't have at least 20. And just we see, Orange County has filed, more than double than the next closest county, which is San Diego. And then, it's not adjusted for population. It's just pure filing. But we see LA, which obviously should be at the top of this list, is not even in the top 5. So this is just an early peek into how different counties are using this new, drug possession felony. And the other thing I wanted to add to this too is we also have some data also from the Judicial Council about the percentage of people who elect to even try to do drug treatment when they have one of these charges filed against them. So that was sort of the promise of Prop 36 made by its proponents, that it would expand access to treatment for a lot of people. And if you're charged with one of these drug possession offenses, you have the choice to try to do treatment for it. And if you complete that, the case will be dismissed. So I looked at just the top 3 counties, and in Orange and Riverside County, only 6% of people who are eligible for drug treatment have even tried to do it. But in San Diego, it's about 40%. So we're seeing, very, at least on those counties, very different, rates of what's going on. So I think, this is something we'll keep an eye on as well. But I think this is sort of some of what the opponents of Prop 36 predicted would happen a little bit. And obviously it's played out in the legislature a lot this year. So that's some early data on Prop 36, and the prison data we'll update monthly. We have it through October right now, through hard work with the California Policy Lab. And we hope to, we'll have November up in the middle of December, hopefully. And this is a slide just showing an overview of all the data work we've done this year. So we have these sort of ongoing resources that, folks can sort of use to explore data that are updated regularly in some data reports. We have the Prop 36 stuff I just showed you. We also have the prison population dashboards that we've talked about a few times, and the URLs are there to access them. There's also a page on the Penal Code Committee website that has links to all this. And we also put out 7 reports this year with the California Policy Lab. A report on women in prison and some, descriptive information about them. And then a series of 6 reports. It was basically a book on second look sentencing in California, and really focusing on recidivism rates as well. And I think, as there's been a few presentations, I think, the committee, but the takeaway is that folks who had done long prison sentences have very low recidivism rates, which not a novel finding, but good to see it happening in our second look laws.
And I just want to add that, we've been at a few conferences where this has been cited and referred to, but somebody from my office was just at a conference in Minneapolis where others who had no connection to the committee were using the report for their presentations. So it is really getting out there and being seen nationwide, which was part of our point, but also satisfying to see and hear.
And the last little data point is violent crime data through September of this year. So this is the slide that is probably familiar to many of you, where we're able to look at, January through September of this year compared to the same time period this year. This just looks at violent crime. It uses data that police departments report up to the Major City Chiefs Association, and we can look at cities in California. It's the 8 largest cities in California, including the areas patrolled by the sheriff in Los Angeles County. And we can look at non-California cities. Basically, crime has continued to go down. Violent crime has continued to go down by double digits. It's the same in California as it is outside California, about 12%. Double-digit drops in homicide, reported robberies, and almost double digits in rape and aggravated assault. And in the 3 areas in this data that are in LA County, which is the Los Angeles Police Department, the Long Beach, and the sheriff, we see basically the same trend: an 11% drop in violent crime and big drops in homicide. So now that we have 9 months of the year, we can be a little bit more confident this is a trend we'll continue to see. And again, it's not really a California story; it's happening throughout the rest of the country, and it's very positive. And I think if this holds, we'll probably be on track to have the lowest homicide rate, going back to at least the 50s in California. So fingers crossed that continues. And obviously, even with that, though, we want these crime rates to be much lower even than they are now. So that's something we'll continue to focus on with the committee next year. All right, I think that's it, Mike. So we got to do the minutes. We didn't do the minutes, did we?
Yes,
or did you do the minutes? Okay.
It hadn't escaped my notice. Anyway, I moved to adopt the minutes from the November, October,
October.
from the October meeting. Second,
Second.
anybody opposed? All right, the minutes are adopted. I think that brings us to the end. We're going to have one more public comment. So as I read before, if you want to make a public comment, please put your raise the hand function in Zoom. We'll see if anybody's there. Tom?
Nope.
All right. I want to say this is, we're going to come to a close. And as we said a few minutes ago, Tom, can you bring us a full screen?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I really, really enjoyed doing this. I think that we are doing great work here. And as I said, the legislature, the governor's office, the courts, they have all really cited and relied on this. As I just said a second ago, even outside of California, people are recognizing and citing and using our work. So that was really the plan. We're a tiny, tiny agency of actually 3 people, which is, amazing. And so, very thanks goes off to Rick, Joy, Tom. We, do amazing work. You're the best in the biz. Thank you to the rest of you. Please don't be a stranger. If there's anything that I can do for you, committee business, please direct to Tom. Everybody have a good, safe, happy Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, the whole thing. Please be safe and be happy. And I'll see you next year. All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.